So, Demetria, what's your take on all these folks talking about, let's be colorblind? Let's think about this from a colorblind approach. We must be colorblind in order to get to where we want to get to in this country.
Color blindness is interesting because in the midst of the civil rights movement, that was the desire.
Mm,
And Black people themselves felt like you can't see my color in order to treat me equally, in order to treat me fairly, in order to treat me with respect. You have to not see, that just tells you where we started. I want you to not see
mhm.
me because the association was so strong with Blackness and criminalization, Blackness and laziness, Blackness and all this other bull that had been programmed essentially over years and years and years. And so that was the desire, right?
Right?
This is Discourse with Daryl and Demetria, a continuation of our conversations on the Diversity Different podcast. And I can remember people saying, I don't see color, for
Mm,
years. And that was actually laudable because for years it meant that I don't see you as different from myself. That was the idea, right? But the fact is, we are different because of that lived experience, right? The way that I live and you live at the bottom of the racial hierarchy in America is very different from the experience of a white American, whether poor or rich.
yes.
There's a different experience associated with that. How this has evolved is into several things, right? This colorblind approach that disallows us from addressing things. That if we're colorblind, then how do we look at health disparity? How do we look at the fact that the infant mortality rate for Black children is 3 times that of white children?
Yes.
How do we look at that if we're colorblind? And not to mention that I want you to see my Blackness. I'm very proud of it. I love it.
Yes.
And if you're saying you're colorblind, that means you're intentionally trying to not see who I
Mm,
am. Because that's a part of my lived experience, regardless of whether you want to see it or acknowledge it or not, right? A lot of people think that if we ignore race, that we can just treat everyone equally. But we know that's not the case. We know that's not a real thing. If we're colorblind, then so are our policies.
yes.
So are the ways that we do things, and that just completely ignores the lived experience of being a person of color.
Can I highlight two things you said that I think are so important? The first one was you talked about it still permeates whether you're rich or poor, right? You said
Mhm.
that. And I love the fact that you highlighted that because so many people want to simply move to classism, right? Well, can we just eradicate all these issues if we just look at
Nope.
class? And you just hit it right on the head. And they need to understand that while class is a very relevant demographic, a very
Mhm.
relevant research point, a way to enter and think about this, that it does not take care of it. And the other line that you used that I picked up on as soon as you said it is when they say, I don't see you as somebody different than me. And really, that first half of the sentence is what you hit on in the end. What they're really saying is, I don't see you,
Mm.
right? I see the you
Mhm.
that reflects what I like and looks like me and is part of me and the parts of me that I really think that you should have in the first place. And now you're more like me. That's what they're saying. I don't see you. I see the me that's in you. And that was really poignant when you said that because all of you, your heritage, your culture, ethnicity, your food, everything about you is what you do want them to see. And I think this is part of when we do DEI trainings. What we're really getting at is we want folks to respect. We want folks to respect those differences. And if you really get lucky, maybe you'll even appreciate those differences, but at least
Mhm.
respect them, even if you can't appreciate them. And that's, I think, what good DEI trainings are about is helping you see what we hope you will respect and maybe, just maybe grow to
'Cause
appreciate.
otherwise it's just tolerance, right?
And I
Like, I
hate that.
don't I'm not respecting, I'm tolerating,
Yes,
right?
I hate that
The
word.
other thing I dislike about
Coiled when you did it. You went like, just like you coiled up. I
Ooh.
saw that. Like,
The other thing I
oh,
dislike is that it creates this false perception of equality.
yes, yes.
I
Talk
don't
about
see
that.
color. You and me are the same, but it's ignoring that my experience is much harder than you. It's different. It's this whitewashing of culture and experience.
Right.
And if we're all equal, then the other part of that is now I'm blaming you for systemic realities. We are all the same. We've all got the same opportunity that creates that kind of thing. We all got the same opportunities. We can all pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. We can
Oh, them bootstraps.
Oh, them bootstraps. I wish somebody
Food and
cut them the
bootstrap.
fuck off. Ain't
And
no
another
straps
and
on none of my boots. Got no boots. Got no flip-flops. Got no damn house shoes.
you
None of
better.
it. But, it creates this perception that all you gotta do is work hard, right? It feeds all into that we're all the same. We all got the same opportunities, etcetera. It denies that lived
Right.
experience
Right.
of all the obstacles that people of color have to deal with. Another thing, and I don't know if this is related, so this might get edited out,
That's
but
fine.
it
All
just makes me think about how well-to-do Southern whites in the days of slavery
mhm.
decided to go and grab poor whites who shared no interest, who didn't own any property, and use them to further oppress Black people by putting them just a stage above in the hierarchy and saying, okay, we're going to give you a gun and a badge and a horse. And now you go get fugitive slaves
Yep.
now. And I think the reason why that came up for me is because you brought up the issue of addressing things from a class perspective, not understanding those lived experiences allows these tricks to be played on one class by another. And we
Yes.
see it today, right? Like you've got a wealthy few controlling the narrative in a way that makes poor whites essentially work for them. It's
Yeah.
working in terms of a vote right now, but it's essentially the same thing that's happening now.
Both from an interracial analysis, which I think is what we did earlier, as well as an intra-racial analysis, which is what you just did, right? This idea that elite whites have made poor whites remain exactly where they are by letting
Mhm.
them know, like, at least you're not them. So whether it was giving them a gun and a badge, throwing them on a horse and saying, go hunt down them fugitive, which is the first policing that came out
Mhm.
was hunting down, or whether it's this idea of these aristocrats who had all of the corporations and monopolies going to the unions and saying, "Don't let them black people into your unions, right? Because
Yep.
you don't wanna" like, it wasn't
When
about
it would
getting
benefit them.
thank you. It would benefit the numbers would benefit them getting closer to the elites, but instead, it was fine staying in your low level so long as you weren't at the lowest level.
And you
It's
still be
that
white.
you'll still at least be white. Intra-racial, right? A whites telling whites, "At least you won't be them. You'll still be white."
The other thing about it, this colorblind approach, if you don't acknowledge the lived experience part,
Mhm, mhm.
if you don't acknowledge the full self part, then you start getting these reverse racism
Yes.
arguments, right? That's born from if we're all the same,
Mm,
then it's racist when you have a policy that prioritizes anything but whiteness.
yes.
And it becomes this argument of reverse racism because laws, policies seem race neutral because we're all the same.
Right, right.
And if we're all the same, then when you have a policy that favors another group that isn't the mainstream, then that's reverse racism,
Yep.
right? And that's what the colorblind way of thinking begats us. That if we don't see race, if we don't make it plain, that if we make it essentially invisible or colorblind, that means it's
Mhm.
invisible, that opens the door for these reverse racism arguments that have been thrown out over time and are now seemingly coming to a head with the Students for Fair Admissions
Right, right,
ruling a few years ago, all of the executive orders that we see on DEI that's calling DEI racism.
right, right,
That's
right.
because of that colorblind way of thinking. If we don't respect it and understand it as a lived experience, everyone is the same. So when you prioritize something else, now that's reverse racism.
Right.
So that's the other problem with it.
I ain't gonna go that you use the word begats. I did catch that one. So, just like
You
you
like
called my
that?
other one earlier, begats
You
is
like
we
bagats?
go hold on to begats a little bit right here.
I used it properly, right?
Oh, I'm
Begat.
not saying it wasn't improper. It's
Okay.
just it's
Make sure.
rare. It's
I don't know where it
like
came from. That is
like
not a
seeing a
regular
unicorn.
word in my vernacular.
I know. I like she walk around talking about begat.
It's Sunday. I'm feeling biblical.
It is biblical, right? I believe that's Genesis.
I skipped church to record this, so we might as well use some biblical
Let's get some
language.
I think this is your second biblical reference today. You've done two already now, so I
Well,
think that
my
counts
cup
as church.
also says, "Let all you do be done in love."
Oh, First
Corinthians
Corinthians.
16:14. Yes.
Look at you. We in church today. Y'all better
We
recognize
are
out
in
there.
church.
Y'all,
I think you've been preaching. And so we
I'm,
definitely in church.
I'm letting it come out my spirit.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Discourse. You can catch the full conversation that sparked this one on the Diversity Different podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.